Your final presenter is Leroy Walston. Lee is an ecologist at the Argonne National Laboratory with over 10 years of experience in natural resource modeling and assessment. His work involves the use of geospatial, analytical, and modeling approaches in environmental system analysis. Much of his recent work has focused on environmental impact reduction, strategies, and opportunities for solar energy developments. Here is Leroy Walston.
All right, hello, my name is Leroy Walston. I'm an ecologist at Argonne National Laboratory, and I'll be sharing with you some research that we've done over the last few years for the U.S. Department of Energy, looking at the ecosystem services of pollinator habitat at solar energy systems. This is work that we've done in collaboration with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and various other partners for the Department of Energy's Solar Energy Technology Office. It's really no surprise that utility scale solar energy has really expanded over the last decade or so. According to the Energy Information Administration, today we have over 35 times more utility scale solar on the landscape than we did in 2010. And this increasing trend is driven in part by decreased costs, improved solar technology, and also incentives and greater emphasis on decarbonized energy production. And despite the benefits that solar energy may have, there are some challenges associated with this type of energy production, namely in the land requirement and the land uses associated with solar energy development. Solar energy development, typically utility scale solar, typically requires anywhere between 2 and 4 hectares per megawatt of electricity generation, and that often results in land use conflicts or challenges or trade-offs with other types of land uses. And when we're talking about utility scale solar, typically we're looking at ground-based solar facilities that are feeding into the energy grid. We're not really talking about residential solar or other types of rooftop solar facilities, even though those are important as well. And so the InSPIRE project that we're working on with NREL for the Department of Energy, it stands for Innovative Site Preparation and Impact Reductions on the Environment. This project broadly covers various strategies and land use options to make solar energy development, utility scale solar energy development, more compatible with the environment. And so all in the effort to improve the land use efficiency of large scale solar. Not only are there efforts and studies to look at pollinator habitat, which is what I will share, what Argonne has been involved in, but there are other studies that NREL and partners, some of the partners you can see at the bottom of the slide, have been involved in looking at other compatible land uses and co-locating solar with agriculture, for example, and livestock grazing, beekeeping co-location, as well as looking at opportunities to improve energy and water and food security, as well as studies looking at the costs associated with some of these strategies. So it's a very broad research topic, and I'll be sharing with you today some of the research that Argonne has been doing under this project, looking at pollinator habitat and ecosystem services of pollinator habitat. And what we mean by pollinator habitat at solar facilities is really just the establishment of native vegetation at solar facilities. Native vegetation such as native grasses or flowers that attract insect pollinators and can provide habitat for them. And as the graph or the image shows at the bottom of the slide here, there are potential benefits associated with this type of vegetation compared to conventional solar vegetation practices such as turfgrass, in that, you know, with native vegetation, you often have greater above and below ground biomass that can help provide a number of benefits, including stormwater and erosion control, soil conservation, better carbon storage potential, increased biodiversity for pollinators and other wildlife, and often, you know, those increased pollinators can also have agricultural benefits to either on-site or off-site agriculture as well. And so there are a few studies that Argonne has been involved in under this InSPIRE project that I'm going to share with you today, and I'd be happy to discuss more at the Pollinator Happy Hour. The first one is sort of a high-level view that we took asking sort of the question of what are the potential agricultural benefits, assuming that if you planted pollinator habitat at all the solar facilities, how much agriculture near these solar facilities could benefit from the spillover effects, if you will, from pollinators visiting these offsite agricultural areas. And so we took this approach by identifying all the solar facilities across the entire U.S. And identifying the nearby agriculture in proximity to these solar facilities to identify the amount of agricultural land within an approximate foraging distance for a pollinator that could benefit from pollinator habitat. And we identified over 3,500 square kilometers of agricultural land across the entire United States that could benefit from pollinator habitat at these solar facilities. This was a study that was done in 2018. And it's got a geographic context here where you can identify several states that really rise to the top in terms of having the greatest amount of agriculture near pollinator habitat, solar pollinator habitat. Specifically looking at areas near solar facilities. Another study that we looked at, we modeled the ecosystem services of solar pollinator habitat at different solar facilities in the Midwest. So looking more regionally within the Midwest and looking at different land use trade-offs among different land uses at solar facilities. So looking at 30 solar facilities in the Midwest, we looked at different land uses associated with solar, one being sort of an agricultural land use, which we assume to be like a pre-solar baseline. And then we looked at a solar turfgrass scenario, which was a solar, which is assumed to be sort of the business as usual case. And then we also looked at a solar pollinator habitat scenario going forward. And so this slide sort of illustrates the 3 different land use scenarios that we modeled at every solar facility, where you've got the solar facility on the bottom, and then you've got the 3 scenarios running across the top. One being, again, an agricultural scenario, solar turfgrass scenario, and then a solar pollinator habitat scenario at these 30 solar sites in the Midwest. And we found that in all cases, pollinator habitat at these solar facilities improved the ecosystem services of a variety of services, including not only pollinator habitat quality, but also carbon storage potential, water conservation, and storm sedimentation or runoff. And so these graphs kind of show the comparisons among the 3 land use scenarios at these 30 solar sites in the Midwest, where in all cases agriculture, the row crop agriculture scenario, which we assume to be the baseline, performed the least in terms of the services that it provided for these 4 types of ecosystem services. And pollinator habitat at these sites had the greatest benefit. And we scaled these results up to a sort of a future energy scenario in which we sort of extrapolated the results to a future energy scenario of 10 gigawatts of solar energy production in the Midwest. And by doing so, we're able to see that pollinator habitat at these facilities can be pretty significant in terms of offsetting some of the carbon emissions from coal-fired power plants, as well as some of the erosion and runoff that might be created by row crop agriculture. And so these are results that were just recently published in the journal Ecosystem Services, and I'd be happy to discuss more at the pollinator mixer or happy hour. And so the third study that I'd like to share with you is fieldwork that we've been doing in Minnesota at solar facilities to measure the pollinator responses to planting of pollinator habitat at solar facilities. This is done, we've been doing this for the last few years at not only the solar sites themselves, but also in adjacent offsite agricultural areas to see what might be the response of pollinators in terms of their visitation to nearby agriculture. And so this is largely based on transect-based monitoring of the solar facilities within the solar facility footprint itself, as shown in some of these transect locations in orange in the image in the middle, as well as some nearby offsite agricultural fields, as shown in the green dots in the image here in the middle. So walking transects, identifying insects visually through a streamlined insect pollinator monitoring protocol, and then measuring the responses. We're still conducting this study, but preliminarily, our results indicate that we are seeing trends in pollinator abundance over time associated with the establishment of pollinator habitat at the solar facilities. So year 0 in this case is the baseline, the year at which pollinator habitat was planted at these solar facilities, and year over year, at least so far, we're seeing increases in pollinator abundance on site at the solar facilities. And then also looking offsite, we're seeing some pretty similar trends offsite in the ag fields associated with these solar facilities. Not only are we seeing associations with distance away from the solar facility, but we're also seeing some interesting patterns in comparison to other agricultural sites, such as reference CRP adjacent ag transects, as well as reference roadside ag transects as well. So these results are all preliminary. We're still collecting data, and we haven't run any statistical analyses yet, but they're showing some pretty interesting initial results, I should say. And we're still conducting field research and field work, not only in Minnesota, but also we're planning on expanding this field work to other areas based on some new funding that was received by the Department of Energy under the UIC proposal that I think Iris Caldwell will either mention if she's following me, or it has already mentioned. So that work will expand a lot of the field research on the ecological impacts of solar pollinator habitat throughout other regions of the Midwest. So I'm excited to see that research go forward. So that's all the information that I wanted to share right now. I'm happy to discuss more at the pollinator mixer. Thank you.